Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Robert Marx, a retired professor of the University of Miami School of Medicine. This is a YouTube presentation on climate change, the hoax of CO2. This will be a preamble to what you're going to view over approximately 10 different segments. This is based on Climate Change, a Hoax of CO2 Revealed, my latest book on how climate change really occurs, and that CO2 has really nothing to do with climate change. The book will tell you that climate change is real. It's advancing slowly at the rate of 1 degree Fahrenheit per century, different from what your politicians are telling you, and that the sea level rise is not due to melting of glaciers. Now, that may be in confrontation with what you're hearing, but stick with this, and I think you will find some interesting data. Now, this is how you can order my book. I would please if you would. And then as we start this, I will show you that there is my uh, email address and my phone number, as well as the publisher. We're open for questions and challenges. So this is all really transparent, things that politicians talk about, but very rarely do. It's called an existential threat. I think you've heard President Biden many times talk about the real existential threat. He even said that global warming is a greater existential threat than nuclear war. Well, I'm not too sure I believe that. But what does existential mean? It means a real existing threat. So rather than use that, the word existential sounds a little bit more scientific, but really it is an existing or real threat. But I would say these three overwhelm that a great deal. So when we talk about existential threats, I want you to think about overpopulation, toxic pollution, and worldwide pandemics. We've just been through one. Okay, the world population today is 8.2 billion people. The population doubles every 35 years. So roughly 35 years from now, uh, 2050, 2060, there will be 16.4 billion people on Earth and probably more. Every new individual of these more 8.2 billion people will require something to eat. They'll require water, shelter, energy, and they leave waste. That all contributes to toxic pollution. Now, this is the curve to show you. This is taken from the World Population, World Health Organization, showing that it's pretty linear if you look at it in billions. So that in 2050, we're going to be looking at 16.4 billion people. Okay. And what I'm alluding to is toxic pollution. Would you dare drink out of the Ganges River, the Hudson River, or the Ohio River? The Ohio River is considered the most polluted river on the world today. You've often heard the commercials about the Camp Lejeune water pollution supply, and then the East Palestine water supply. Perchloroethylene, trichloroethylene, dioxin all came and has now flowed into their creeks and rivers. And guess what? Those rivers flow into the Ohio River, which flows into the Mississippi River. So our river systems have been totally polluted. That's more of an existential threat. That gets into your water supply. It gets into your bodies. And a lot of these strange diseases that we have, from restless leg syndrome on down to some psychiatric issues, some of them been trying to trace it to the toxic aspects of our water supply. Certainly unproven, certainly food for thought. So what about pandemics? Over the years, more pandemics have occurred. They've been more transmissible. They can mutate around vaccines, as we learned from the COVID. And our world leadership has acted very poorly, and they've been very corrupt. Remember, Anthony Fauci and the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said initially that the COVID virus could not be transmitted from human to human. Boy, were they wrong. They were also wrong about vaccines. They were also wrong about masks. They were also wrong about lockdowns. So our leadership was horribly lacking. And one of the reasons it did is that Anthony Fauci took himself as the king of the pandemic and didn't include people who were actually treating COVID and learning from that experience. He disavowed any aspects of research into therapeutics, but relied on vaccines hurriedly placed with a new technique that proved to be a failure. And if you don't believe me, understand that President Biden and President Trump both developed COVID after they were doubly vaccinated and doubly boosted. And so did many other people, as I think you probably know. So we need better leadership. Now, this seems to be a confusing slide, but what I want to estimate, let's look at the really big pandemics. Back in the 1348 to 1355, 50 to 78 million died of the Black Plague, which was a bacteria called Yersinia pestis. And then we see several other diseases. The smallpox in particular, 48 million died. That was mainly our indigenous people in the Americas. Then looking at just the big one, Spanish flu. 50 to 70 million people died in a 3-year period from 1919 to 1922. And then Asian flu, Hong Kong flu, scattered Ebola outbreaks, AIDS. 33 million people have died of AIDS since it first came out in 1980. And then COVID, 27 million. A point I want to make by looking at this is that notice from the Spanish flu down, from 1919 down, our plagues have been mainly viral. Viral is more transmissible. Viral can be more deadly. Viral doesn't respond to antibiotics too well. We have to have antivirals, and they have to be specifically made for the virus. So want you to consider that and compare that to global warming as this terrible existential threat. And just a slide that will probably be hard to understand. If you look at the left, this is the Black Death back then. That was bacteria. But look at the cluster that we have gotten now since 1889, almost all due to viruses. So be careful of pandemics as another real existential threat. So let me conclude by just getting back to point one. Climate change is real. It's going on from solar output and the Milankovitch cycles being closer to the Earth in its elliptical orbit than it has in many, many millennia. Sea levels are rising for all the reasons that I mentioned, mainly rebound from the last ice age as fresh water from land is draining into our oceans. It is not so much coming from the ice pack because that's in water and it's only going to rise a level if it is over land. None of that is due to CO2 and fossil fuels. We are tying our hands behind our back as a country by believing the assertion that CO2 is the big culprit. It is not. And so fossil fuels certainly should be used as a minimum, but EV cars won't replace it, and neither will any electrical system replace the energy we get. The main difference relates to physics once again. The energy density of gasoline and diesel, it's 117 times less energy density you can get from electricity. And that's why EV vehicles will never be able to do more than a small truck like your Amazon trucks and jitneys. They take you to and from the airport. Any 18-wheeler, any 2-ton truck will not be able to use electricity because the battery will be much too heavy. And certainly airplanes won't either, and heavy machinery. So global warming, sea level rise is going on. It's going on slowly, but neither of them is due to CO2. So climate change is real. CO2 is the actual hoax. Again, for more details, please get a copy of this book. It's easy to read, has a lot of the pictures I've just shown you in it. It's something you can look at and get some detail and be able to confront those who wildly predict the end of the world due to climate change, because it's just not occurring. We've all been duped and misled by greedy, sometimes well-meaning people, but it's not been an actual science. I hope that everybody is able to handle this truth. This is a copy of the book. I do hope you are able to get it and read it. It won't take long. It's an easy read. Thank you for listening. I hope this is a good educational experience for everyone, and I hope the science that I explained is understandable to everyone, not just scientists. Thank you.